Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thank You 5, Straw Dog Theater Company's weekly talk show where we discuss theater. What does theater mean to you, and what is theater in the digital age? We do this weekly or nearabouts, and we're joined every week by a panel of 4 wonderful guests. We try to do this with an air of energy and enthusiasm and giving and I'll say love. I'm going off the notes right now, but my name is Hank Boland. I'm an ensemble member at Straw Dog Theater Company. Been an ensemble member there for 20 years. I'm an arts educator, an arts management person. I teach at Columbia College. I teach in the screenwriting department, and I'm a playwright. So that's sort of who and what I am. Like, call me if you need bail. Like, I'm that guy. I'm here for you. We've got 4 amazing guests tonight. We're going to start out with Cassandra. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hello, my name is Cassandra. I use she, her pronouns. I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, even though I lived in Chicago for over a decade. I'm a playwright, I'm a screenwriter, I'm an audio drama writer. I write for video games. In 2 weeks' time, one of my plays called Skyflint is going up with Haven Chicago as part of their Directors Haven 7, directed by Gabby Labatka, and I hope people will attend it. I'm going to throw it now over to Grace.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Grace. I use she, her pronouns. You might also know me around Chicago as Foxy LaFleur because I am also a burlesque performer and producer. But I've been in Chicago for over a decade as well. But I'm originally from Southern California. I've worn so many different hats in performing arts: singer, actor, dancer, choreographer, props designer, director. I don't know, live stream tech, like so many things. But I am really excited to be here and chat about theater in the digital age and how we can incorporate more digital stuff into theater. I'm very passionate about that. And I will turn it over to Elsie.
Hi, thanks, Grace. I'm Elsie Bernadine, playwright, and like everyone in theater, more than that, in that I have been involved in lots of different aspects of theater making here. For me, I think what I enjoy most is sort of supporting and connecting people who are doing amazing things. I was part of starting a table read support service for playwrights developing new works called Broken Bell Reads. And the thing I'm working on right now is an independent production of Carol Churchill's play Far Away that my friend and frequent collaborator Spencer Huffman is directing at a working factory in Bowmanville, where we organized and arranged to do this amazing on-site production because the factory owner thought it was the coolest idea to, as he put it, have another very different kind of drama in the factory than he normally has to deal with. Anyway, so
incredible.
It's just one of the great things about being in Chicago theater is there's no shortage of an opportunity to support exciting things being done by people you love. And Richard.
Hi, I'm Richard Gustin. I'm a playwright, deviser, actor, producer, teacher out of Milwaukee, and I really appreciate being here tonight. Thank you, Hank, for the invitation. The project I'm working on right now, I'll be producing the premiere of one of my plays out in LA in October at the Art of Acting Studio in Hollywood on Orange Drive in October. So looking forward to that, and looking forward to finding a couple actors to do that with. So thanks.
So LA folks can get directly in touch with you how?
They can text me. I can
let's not give out your number. Well, we'll plan.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want you having to start taking calls during this hour. Yeah.
Email would be
Caller number 5 will win a role in this play.
Yeah, but operators are standing by. If you'd like a role, goes to the highest bidder who can pay
email.
for Richard's.
I'm pretty easy.
airfare.
I'm pretty easy to message on Facebook. I'm pretty easy to find on Facebook.
Okay.
So that's a good way to just PM me on Facebook. I think I'm pretty easy to find.
Okay, awesome.
Or I should say richardgustin.com is my site. So pretty easy. richardgustin.com.
Yeah.
You'll find
That's
me.
perfect.
Okay.
That's perfect. Brilliant. All right. So, what is theater, right? Like, I know it's like a huge question. It's a personal question. It's a professional question. You can run and gamble with this answer as far as you like. I think I'm going to start with you, Grace. I am curious what you think. What is theater for you? What does it mean to you?
Oh, that's such a great question because I've been performing since I was a kid. I went to a performing arts high school out in Orange County, the Orange County School of the Arts, and I mean, my journey has taken me from small town little theater to working with Broadway artists to burlesque. So that is what I have been doing the majority of my adult life, is being a burlesque performer and producer, who also then dabbles in the theater realm. But I think personally, for me, theater is it's escapism. It's anything that kind of really suspends reality for onlookers, and also I think for the participants, like who are performing themselves. I think theater is something that really allows us to almost like step outside of ourselves and like elevate ourselves to fantasy in a way. Especially with burlesque. Burlesque is essentially like fantasy on stage, and then you go backstage and it's not a fantasy at all. It's hilarious tomfoolery, but definitely not glamorous backstage, but we give that illusion, right? And so I think especially as theater has evolved over decades and eras, it really, especially in today's like digital age, I think it really does give people an opportunity to escape from what we are experiencing, to also like unplug a little bit from our phones, but also like stay plugged in digitally. It's interesting. There's so many like ways that digital stuff has been incorporated into theater that helps us escape, but also helps us stay connected to theater. Yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Anyone can jump in, I guess.
Well, let's just keep going. LC, what are you thinking?
I think of theater as like the conversation you never expected to have with the friend that you hardly know, but it's so electrifying you end up staying up all night and going out for pancakes at 5 in the morning and waking up the next day with a whole different perspective on the day. But the pancakes cost you a lot of money, you know. that there's something about it that's always unexpected and always illuminating, but also grounded in actual relationships with something, sometimes with real people, sometimes with ideas, sometimes with institutions, but that it's you know, it's like this gigantic cultural conversation. But it costs money.
Yeah. And the pancakes.
And the
right?
pancakes, you know, come with it.
Yeah. Richard, what do you got? What's theater to you?
Well, I think the presidential campaign in the United States currently is high theater. I mean, it's a great example. I mean, we partake or not partake in that every day. I mean, there's you know, there's voice, movement, words, visual effects to what? Impart meaning, to try to express meaning that I'm the person that you should get on board with. Yeah, I mean, I think playwrights do that, don't we? I mean, we try to craft words and visual effects and movement and characters that audience members want to get on board with. We want them to buy in. Yeah. So Yeah, I mean, theater is a dialogue between self and the world, between self and others to create meaning.
Hey, I like it. I like it. Cassandra.
Yeah, this is my fourth time on Thank You Five, and I always make it a point to not repeat my answer to this question too much. I think in the past I've talked about how theater is liminal, about the magic of stagecraft, of like Peter Pan flying on stage hits different than Peter Pan flying in a movie. I've also talked about it being repeatable and it being the ritual of it, that like it's got to stand up to people saying it over and over again, or to people wanting to perform it over and over again and across the nation, different casts, etc. I think this time I'm gonna go with the word authorial. And I think that comes also, like I said, I work in a lot of different mediums. So part of how I define what theater is what is it not in these other areas. And I think about in film and television with screenwriting, like scripts get chopped up, actors' performances get chopped up. You do 3 or 4 takes of something, 12 takes of something. I've talked to editors where they're like, you can take the sound from one take and kind of insert it literally into the mouth of the visual of a different take. Like there's so much Frankensteining that can happen there, that even when people are like, wow, that's a great performance, it's like, but that probably wasn't what it was like being in the room with it. Same with video games, of like, there's just so many people and so many moving parts. There's a reason that we don't really know the authors of a lot of video games, that it is so stratified. However, when you go to the theater and you see an actor performing on stage, you know that's their performance. You see the lights that the lighting designers have created, that moment is what's happening. It's not being filtered by a cinematographer or tweaked by somebody else. The sound is the sound that's being played. So while theater is still very collaborative, I still think of it having that authorial control of each person is giving what they are giving. And I think there's something beautiful and magical about that, and allows a lot more risk-taking and also fluidity from performance to performance, from person to person, and gives it an extra bit of life. So that's my answer.
Well, it's personal, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, theater is a visceral, personal experience where we we interact with each other in real time. I mean, that's so different from the film experience. I mean, I think that's that journey to create meaning in that space at that particular time. I mean, you know, not to be to sound flippant, but the theater happening in war-torn areas of the world right now is very different from the theater happening in upper-class neighborhoods. I mean, theater answers the needs of the people who are assembled.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question about what both of you just said, which I don't disagree with, but I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about whether the very fact that, unlike other ways of consuming entertainment, information, transformation, theater requires an audience to actually give attention to a living, breathing human being. And my friend said, you know, that's actually part of the challenge for audiences returning after the pandemic, that we as theater makers feel like, here's this gift. We are live, we are visceral, we are magical, we are not Peter Pan on a screen, where Peter Pan, as Cassandra said, flying through the air right in front of you, but that there's something out there that's like this little glass wall that didn't seem to exist before, quite as noticeably anyway, where maybe resistance is too strong a word, but that it's almost people are backing away from that rather than saying, let me go and submit to it. I'm just curious what your and that may not be true in Grace, something like burlesque, where I think everybody shows up just they're going to be there for you, and they are there in such a physical way. But have any of you had any sense of that, of, whether it's technology or trauma or the nature of other forms of entertainment that are more a closed loop? Is it harder for audiences to sort of willingly say, I will give this living, breathing thing in front of me my full attention?
Question. Do you want to take it first, Grace, and then go from there?
I'm still
No?
thinking
Okay.
about it.
Cool. I can take it. I was talking to a friend yesterday about growth areas of arts post-pandemic, and one of the biggest growers is live events of all types. So that, of course, includes concerts, that includes like the Bridgerton experience, that includes like we've taken Van Gogh's paintings and we are projecting them on the wall and you can feel like you're walking through it. And I think with a lot of those experiences and why they're surging so much and why people are so excited about them, at least from my perspective, is that when you show up as the audience member, you know what your part is in it. And I think that's true with burlesque, right? We train our audiences like, hey, you're going to be watching some bodies bouncing, but also like you are giving to this. You are giving money, or you're giving cheers, you're giving energy to that. That is the communication. I think a lot of people, when they think about theater, especially because I talk to a lot of people that like work in the tech industry that don't do theater, when they think of theater, they think of, I am supposed to passively sit here and just absorb. They don't see themselves as like being a rambunctious crowd or like cheering for people winning or like sobbing in a communal space. They think it's, I have to be passive and quiet. And when you have that expectation, it's like, well, if I have to be passive and quiet, I could just be at home watching a movie. And at least if I'm passive or quiet there, I can pause it and use the bathroom, or I can make it my own active thing of I'm yelling at the movie screen with my friends and I'm creating that activity. For me, when I was coming back to theater, this is my first play going up in Chicago in over 5 years that I have coming up. For me as a writer, it was me being like, what do I want to put on the stage if I'm coming back? What will make me feel joy and what would bring an audience joy? So for me, it was a lot of like, let me show the things you can do in theater that you might not think you can do, or that you didn't realize it could be done in this way. So like I have a squid fight on an airship in a steampunk world. And every time I describe that to somebody, they're like, that's a very different theater experience than when I think of theater. But for the theater people that are here, I'm sure they're all like, oh yeah, that sounds normal. And so like, that's what I'm exploring. And that's what I'm trying to break down of like, if it's not going to be quiet and passive, it's going to be energetic. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be filled with a lot of emotion. And that's why you're going to want to be in the room while it's happening. Was that enough time for you, Grace?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's so fun to say. And I think like right now we are truly experiencing a huge, obviously cultural shift that was prompted by the pandemic of what humankind's kind of like expectations are, and when it comes to being involved in their own entertainment in a way, like. I think about like this past summer with like the whole Barbenheimer situation, where people want, to feel really connected to what they're watching, like they connect with these characters. They want to connect with each other through this shared experience. And I think it's so funny when you mention like your play has like squids fighting on a, what is it, a cruise ship? Like, I don't know.
Airship. It's a dirigible.
An airship? Nice.
Yeah, and then a squid attacks. Yeah.
Oh, that's so much fun. And I think too, people are just like letting their imaginations go a lot more wild, because I think we were cooped up for so long that like we had no other choice, right? We all kind of had to connect with our own like inner child in a way, to keep ourselves entertained, and I think that that's really carrying over with, people kind of embracing like nerd culture, like owning the fact that they're really like big fans of certain things, or like nerding out about whatnot. They used to be like, you used to like make fun of those kids, and now it's like, it's cool to be a nerd, right? And so I think a lot of, audience members are really wanting to feel that connection. And I think that's why we're seeing such a huge uptick in like, more like kind of immersive live experiences as things kind of opened up again after being locked down for so long, is people still want that escapism. They still want that connection of something that's bigger than them. And maybe it's being on an airship and a squid is attacking, and that's going to give them that connection, but and I feel that way too about like with like burlesque, and like we're good at training our audiences like how to be a good burlesque audience member. Like our hosts give them a spiel at the beginning, like don't touch the performers, otherwise you will get kicked out. Or like, we are like Tinkerbell, you have to clap for us, otherwise we will die. Like, we have to like train our audience members, because we are curating a very specific experience through that. And sometimes even shows are like encouraging, like, whip out your phones and like, take a little clip of the show and tag us, because we're also struggling against the monster of digital marketing in the age of social media. So like there's that too. But I feel like I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent. I don't know where I'm at.
I think that theater is very different coming out of COVID, because a lot of people died, and a lot of people are still ill, and facing our mortality through that very scary period. I mean, we do remember 2020 and the heroism of 2020 with healthcare workers. I mean, come on, who went to work, laid down their lives during a very scary time, took care of people. A lot of people died around the world, and I think people want to peek their heads out of their doors and come into a space where living people are. And having faced our mortality the past 4 years, it's changed. It's because I think people come into the theater to find out who they are. I mean, I think that's fundamentally why actors and why audience members come. They go, yeah, who am I? And they see, Elsie's or Cassandra's or Grace's or Hank's production, right? And they go, oh, that's who I am. Well, gosh, I didn't know that, and it's clearer to me now. I just think we have a tremendous responsibility as theater makers to, it's corny to say it, but to tell the truth. And one can tell that in a very loving way, and it moves an audience member and an actor from here to here. And they say to themselves, I think, at least in my experience, is that, you know what, life is worth living. It's worth living because there are people like this, and these words and these actions, that it's so meaningful. Yeah, it's been so meaningful. This has been a sacred experience because people have been telling the truth. And wow, I'm going to try and be more truthful to myself, more truthful with my friends, more truthful in my own family because of what I experienced today. I mean, doesn't that happen kind of on a subconscious level in the theater as audience members?
Something that I've been putting in a lot of grant applications and pitches when people are like, why are you writing about this when other things are happening in the world? I really love talking about the Pepper's ghost effect, which usually draws a blank look from people, but it is a magic trick you can do. If you've ever been to Disneyland, you've probably seen it because that's how the Haunted Mansion ballroom dancing scene with all the ghosts happen. You basically, if this is the surface that the audience is looking through, we're going to do it with hands. If they're looking through here, you have like a pane of glass there, but then you also have another pane of glass at about 45 degrees. So you have the ghost dancing down here. and then it's reflected on the 45-degree angle. And because there's the glass pane, the audience can't tell that there's two panes of glass, and they think that they're looking through and seeing three-dimensional ghosts actually dancing in there. So that's another way of reflecting the world back to the audience, is being like, if we angle this at 45 degrees, I'm going to take you on this airship and we're going to go up with this crew that's just trying to figure out what's above this cloud cover that's existed for 100 years. But surprise, the story is actually about grief. It's actually about found families. It is actually about undiagnosed anxiety disorders and or finding your queer community and your identity now that you are out in the real world. Like, all those things are also happening at the same time. And so, yeah, you do have that connection and learn who you are. But because sometimes it's really hard to look directly in the mirror at that glass and see just yourself, especially after such a difficult time like 2020, that like
absolutely it's hard,
yeah.
But you're doing it with a group of people. You're doing it in community, and that gives you courage to do it, because you go, oh, other people are doing it with me. That gives me courage. You're not doing it alone.
Yeah.
I'm also like, this is why all of you are playwrights, because you're so good with words, and I'm sitting here like almost speechless, because I'm like, wow, yeah, man, that's so deep, like deep into the pool deep. I love this.
I mean, if you're more comfortable getting up and moving around while we're doing this, you can do that.
Yeah,
okay. I did not expect an explanation of Pepper's ghost tonight. Right?
That was brilliant.
Happened.
And that's also my favorite ride at Disneyland, and I love the theatricality of that immersive experience. So it's really fun that you brought that up.
Yeah,
it's probably like the best analogy I've heard of like theater reflecting life to the audience. I was like, that's actually perfect. Like,
nailed it. Everybody, give me money. Let me make more plays. We can build a theater company. Hey, what if we start a theater company?
Called Pepper's Ghost. Pepper's Ghost Theater Company. PGTC. Reflecting
and we do
life
a production of
at 45 degrees.
Yes. And our first production is The Haunted Mansion.
Yeah.
The mansion
those ghosts? Like, yeah, what happened to those ghosts? What are their stories?
Call the same number if you'd like to give money to this new. We're going to write a grant, and we're going to start planning our retreat.
I love it.
That is actually seriously one thing that is missing in the Chicago landscape. Just to toss this out there, is although it's critical, of course, that theaters like Straw Dog that have been around for 30 years are supported and continued to be supported, et cetera, and places that have, contributed enormously for decades and help us all, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, the one thread that's missing, and that just increasingly I keep thinking there's got to be some organizing to get going here in Chicago, is there needs to be some kind of pooled fund that a group of foundations perhaps could start, that would be exclusively for one-off, self-produced, spontaneous, this group comes together for this purpose, for this show, and that question is never asked about sustainability, which is sort of a false promise in the first place, but that's not a factor in determining whether or not funding ought to go to that particular initiative or project or vision, because there's so many amazing things that are bubbling up and in the works and that people talk about. And of course they get stuck on, well, where do we go for funding for that? You know? And there could be, there's no reason such a thing couldn't exist in a town that is such a big theater town and also such a big philanthropy town, something that supports that particular, row in the big field.
Oh, so true. I feel like I can't tell you how many times I've had these kind of discussions with like fellow friends and colleagues of like, these beautiful and fun and wonderful like ideas bubble up, but then it always comes down to, well, how do we pay for it? Because we are also now making theater in late stage capitalism. And so kind of bringing it back to these like really big immersive experiences, like, of course those can happen because they have a huge budget. Where are the up and coming talent gonna get that kind of money in order to build these really cool ideas that they have that could be just as great, if not better?
Well, and also the
right?
assumption that's out there at all, that your intent is even to build an institution. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's absolutely the thing you have zero interest whatsoever in doing, and yet you're forced to sort of wedge into that model because that's the model that currently exists, that is the only way money changes hands, right? So other structures would enable that question to not even be on the table.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of Cord Jefferson winning the Oscar for his screenplay and saying like, yeah, we can keep making $100 million movies, but also what if we made $10 million movies? So instead of like starting another theater company, what if we just did a show? I feel is a similar kind of vibe to that. And this comes from somebody who has accidentally started multiple theater companies over the years. Yeah. It would have been better if we'd been like, one and done, let's do this. Yeah. And it creeps up on you. I just started another theater company right now, apparently. So like, right? It's a slippery slope, guys.
It's such a slippery slope being a creative because you just literally everything just becomes art to you in a way. And you're like, I just want to make all the cool things. Gosh, yeah, I really liked that Oscar speech. I was like, ugh. We really do need to like figure out a better system for splitting up the money so that way more awesome things can happen. Because I don't know, like think about how much money like the Marvel movies like are making. Like they all have come out lately and not been great. And it's like, man, if I could have a sliver of that budget, the most amazing show live could happen. And then we could also live stream it like with cool, like, I don't know, film crews and with fun angles and stuff. You know, like there's it's just frustrating. I wish there was more money for live art.
It's just frustrating. I think it's just frustrating. Like, yeah.
Period.
You know, I think back to you know, right? Like I feel like there's so many different forces that drive this, right? Like late stage capitalism, absolutely. Equitable pay, absolutely. All of that stuff. But like, it seemed to me that there was so much more of that energy in the 90s here in town. But it also feels like that because there seems like there were so many more venues that were cheap enough for you to say, let's do a show for 4 weeks. And nobody's going to have to go broke doing it. And the venue's small enough that, you know, all our friends will come see it. And that's really what we're doing it for. And you're right. The impetus to have to frankly, to need to be an institution in order to get funding, it wasn't necessarily there. It's like, oh, somebody stuffed a flyer in the reader and I want to go see this thing at Live Bait. And like, it's going to cost me it's also only going to cost me $5 to go there. And it's also only going to get, even if I jump in a cab across town, it's only going to cost me $5 to get there. Right? Like there's so many other things that are impacting this. I sort of want to go back, circle way back to some of the stuff that Richard was talking about. And also ULC with like the pandemic itself, right? Like certainly I agree. It is not over. It is still a very active thing for very many members of our community, both our theater community and the general populace. One of the things I think, right, like that it was such a traumatic happening, right? And the first thing, like because we're right on the 4-year anniversary of this part too, right? We're going to eradicate all of your simple daily rituals. They're gone. You don't shake hands, you don't smile at people, you don't leave the house, like all of those, right? And that eradication of the everyday without necessarily having an art form ready to respond to that also. And Elsie, you were talking about like, are people like willing to come back and submit to this? And I wonder how much that interruption of ritual is still really impacting, well, certainly traditional live theater.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, of course, know the answer to that, but I think it has a little bit in this kind of subtle, insidious way, perhaps, where there's almost some additional justification to not go there if you're just, if it's a bigger step for you to have to be in that kind of a universe, right? If you prefer to stay inside and have a relationship with a screen where, it comes in and it goes out, but it's just sort of this kind of loop that is not about other human beings in the same way, that it's just an interesting time where you'll hear more often people sort of admit with a little chuckle, like, I actually didn't mind parts of the pandemic. I was okay. I'm basically antisocial, right? And now that's a little bit more acceptable or something. Not that it was ever not exactly, but I just think there's this additional hump for people, and both in terms of theaters and productions trying to reel folks in, and those who may have had just had to take more of a deep breath, who aren't, what Cassandra, what you were describing before, which is a great and beautiful thing that is also happening, where people are craving it and wanting that interaction and the beating heart in the same space and breathing together and all the rest. But I think there are people for whom anyway, yeah, I think the pandemic has deepened some of the neuroses that makes it sometimes challenging, to use this as an analogy, for people to make eye contact. And theater is like a giant metaphor for, can you make eye contact?
Well, we have this shared experience that is really mythic of illness and alienation, and as Hank's bringing up, not able to do all the rituals that we were used to doing, socially interacting, and I don't think we even know who we are at this point. That would be my hypothesis. Okay, I'm not sure people really know who they are coming out of COVID. They know, I know, okay, I'll speak for myself. My life was altered, but I also lost time. And that's the most delicate commodity, isn't it? And for some people, okay, yes, they lost their lives, and it impacted families unalterably. And so where does where does theater respond to that? Well, it responded on Zoom, right?
Yeah.
It responded on virtual productions. That was a good thing. It's still responding on virtual productions. People still interact that way, right? I mean, we would not be together today, the 6 of us, were it not for COVID, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, this art form, this media form, sprung from a need, and exploded for a need, and so I guess I'll go back to that premise. I'm not sure we know who we are. We're rediscovering who we are, and I think it's helped. I hate to say that COVID has helped. I'm trying to look at a positive. It's helped us what? Well, ask the question like a lot of us have done. What am I doing with my life?
I think that's a big reason why so many people are doing the whole like great resignation right now. They realize like, I don't want to be, spending all of my time doing something that doesn't make me happy. And like, sure, work doesn't always have to be like, oh, joy, joy, I'm doing everything I love, but at least like something that you don't mind doing, like, and
Something that you don't hate doing.
yeah, something that you don't hate doing. And I will say too, I think that TikTok actually was an extension of society using theater. I think about like, all the viral like TikTok dances. That was like the only way for a lot of people. And like I think that spanned multiple generations, not just Gen Z, but like for people to really connect in such a time where all we really had were like maybe the people living with us and the screens in front of us. Um, and some of my favorite like productions I've ever made were over the pandemic because we did these like digital burlesque movies and live streamed them, and it was the most fun thing I've ever worked on. And it actually has made me a lot more interested in potentially diving more into doing like TV and movies. Because I'm at that point in like my career where I've literally been doing theater since I was single digit age, and now I'm like, wow, there's so much more cool like theatrical in a different medium to explore. And I think a lot of people have had kind of like similar revelations in their lives where they're like, wow, I can actually dream some new dreams and maybe pursue other things that I never would have thought could have been possible. Yeah.
This feels like the time I'm going to get on the soapbox, going back to what Elsie was saying about like all the barriers for people coming to theater. Something I learned during the pandemic was to write for video games, and I specifically worked for a romance mobile game company that adapted romance
I am
books.
so excited about this. We have to talk about that first.
We will. But yeah, I adapted published romance novels into what are known as visual novels, which are basically like choose your own adventure style games. And when I was getting, yeah,
you're
good.
so cool. I'm so excited.
You're welcome. One of the things we learned the first week is like, hey, every book that somebody starts in this app is going to be their first book, and every book in this app is going to be their last book. And the goal is to make the space between the first and the last as wide as possible. You got to get them to fall in love with this, either fall in love with it for the first time or fall back in love with what you are providing for them. And I take that with me into theater a lot now too, of like, you want to reward the person who has shown up, that has gone all the way across town. Either it was like an hour and a half on multiple buses, or they had to pay for that extra expensive lift, something, they had to get a babysitter, they had to take time off of work, whatever it was, to be like, thank you for coming. This is like a first date. Please fall in love. Let me give you a reason to be here. Yeah. And for me, part of that is like, be entertaining, give them something of value in return for all that sacrifice. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think something that I have loved to see be adapted into kind of like post-lockdown times. I'm not saying post-COVID because COVID is still a thing, but like after things stopped being locked down, is more people doing live streams of their shows. Even as like live performances. And I think that has opened up a lot of accessibility, especially if it's like being, performed in a venue that isn't accessible, right, to wheelchairs or anyone who's using any sort of mobility device. Or, the person who got sick and really wanted to see the show and like they can still be included. Or it's your aunt who lives in Barcelona and like wants to tune in from over there. Like it's created a great amount of accessibility, and I'm really happy to see that. I have seen it like dip off a little bit because accessibility is always something that people forget about, right? But I am really happy that is something that has come out of this like forced digital age of like being locked down in a global pandemic.
Yeah, it's something most people have been able to show and prove that they can do when necessary. But you're right, it has dropped off. And the ideas around like how do how do you make it not special? How do you make that always the thing? Right? Like that's hard, right? Like everybody's like and it comes back to what you were saying, Elsie, right? Like how does it, how does it impact my institution if people don't come through my institution's doors and buy something from my institution's bar and walk away with an institution t-shirt, all of those things. Man, wow. Yeah, I don't want to be, yeah. It's hard to have an institution, I think.
It is. All the ways things have changed, that has changed not a whole lot over the last 40 years. I mean, what it takes to start a nonprofit, run a nonprofit, do it correctly, the places that have folded have rarely folded because their product wasn't good enough, right? It was all those other reasons about what does it take to truly deal with the real costs of being an institution that's a container for this thing we all love, but nonetheless has to not get broke as a container, or the thing we love won't happen. And I think there's just still a long way to go with that. At the same time, I'm if I were looking ahead to some of the things I'm excited about in our last few minutes, I'm excited about the opening of Bramble Arts Loft, which is happening
Yes.
and really is going to be just a wonderful new source of energy and programming and opportunity for lots of different companies and artists. And I think that's just a huge, big step that a group of people decided to take, and it's going to be amazing.
I'm very excited for that. My friend Carissa is one of the co-artistic directors, and she, everyone has been working so hard on that, and it kind of we talked about how like there's been a lack of venues in Chicago, especially I think because COVID had a lot of places closed down, and so it is harder to kind of get those one-off shows kind of put up. On top of it being financially challenging right now it's like, well, where do we even do it? So it's really exciting that they're opening a new space. I think our theater community really needs it, and I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah,
I can speak. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, when I did live in Chicago, the job that I had the longest was working at the front desk of a co-working space for nonprofit literacy organizations. And I saw firsthand what a galvanizing effect it was to have all of those folks under the same roof at the same time and getting to collaborate with each other and finding organic ways. Yeah, my job was to be like, here's everybody at every institution who has a birthday this month, come get cake together, come be in the same room and connect that way. And every time I told the theater person, like, this is where I work, this is why it's great, they were like, why isn't there that for theater? And I was like, I don't know, but I'm working minimum wage here, so I can't afford to make that myself. So I'm so glad that this Bramble Arts Center is happening and is creating a version of that. It's so cool.
I don't know.
And it's like right down. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I was just going to say Bramble's just right down the street from the new, I'm blanking on the coffee shop.
The Understudy.
The Understudy.
Bring it up.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But right, like theater is our ritual, right? So it's not hard necessarily for us all to get back to it. And we all understand the magic of like, hey, we need to get people in the room, right? And whether it's a coffee shop or a co-working space or a production or a rehearsal, I think we get that, right? Like none of us are shocked that coffee shop is filled at all times, right? Like of course, people want a place to go to be, or at least theater people do, right? And I think maybe that's some of it also, Elsie. I was thinking about what you were saying, what everybody was saying about all of this and the difference between screens and live, and the ethereal take that I'm gonna love to explore. But right, like so much of it is like a film is so much, or a TV is so much about something just happening to me, but theater is like happening with, right? We want
Audiences
to,
are co-creators. They
yeah,
co-create the moment, they co-create the production. As we have always said, it never happens the same way twice. You will never see that performance, that live
yeah,
performance. You'll never see her that brilliant, them that brilliant, right? Never see
yeah,
them that brilliant as you saw that night. That's that's like
yeah,
that's palpable. I mean, people who've experienced that, they don't let go of that. You know, they say, I saw Vanessa Redgrave, I saw Philip Seymour Hoffman on that night, you know, and they remember it the rest of their lives. Now, I understand you remember a movie for the rest of your life, maybe if It's a Wonderful Life or The Wizard of Oz. I understand that. But a living human being breathing fire in front of you, speaking the truth, is you don't want to escape that spell, if you will. I mean, in the most positive sense of the word, that spell of this is what it can be to be a human being.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just, to me, again, another reason why there needs to be some kind of fund for self-producing efforts. Because the time frame is you lose the immediacy, you lose the opportunity to have that experience that you just described, Richard, or to have it as often as you could. You look at the understudy that just, I don't know if any of you saw Hannah Kimes play Best Damn Thing, which was just fabulous. A self-produced, at the understudy, full musical. If she had tried just exclusively to get that put up at, one of the 4 places in town that even do new musicals, you'd be talking about 19, however many years, right? A long time. It would be 2027 before it would see the light of day, if it ever did. And yet she and her team said, you know what, we're going to do this. We're going to talk to the guys at understudy. We're going to run it like a full production, 12 nights. We're going to do it. We're jumping in and do it. And they did, and it was fantastic. I'm sure she and the team hopes it still goes somewhere from there into a fuller sort of production, but there needs to just be ways to keep that happening.
All right. So I told you this time would go so fast. I can't believe that it is. Like I've got to go do thank you things now, right? So I'm gonna do a round of thank yous. And while I'm doing that, like I said, a book, something to recommend, right? So be thinking about that. So I'm going to run through some quick thank yous. Thank you number 1 to officehours.global, Guy Cochran, Edwin Ruiz, who's here producing the show tonight, Mondo Machine, KBH Media for helping make the technical parts of this show possible. They're our institution. Thank you number 2. The show is made possible by Straw Dog Theater Company and its ensemble members. Straw Dog is run on a free theater model, and all our main stage productions are available to everyone free of charge. But the only way we can make that happen is through donations. So you can find more information about donating to Straw Dog or becoming a sustaining monthly member at strawdog.org/donate. There's a link in the show notes. Probably I'm pointing down there. Speaking of Straw Dog Ensemble members, thank you number 3 goes out to Kyle Hammond for creating and producing this show. He's a big fan of thank you number 3. Thank you number 4 to our audience. Folks that tune in every week live, watching it on archive. Some folks just listen to it from what I've heard. That's interesting. But thank you so much for following the show and following these ongoing conversations and chiming in and throwing in questions. Without you, without community, it would just be 5 people talking to themselves, which we've proven is fun, but also not quite the same. So thank you so much for watching and participating. And the fifth thank you five, to our amazing panelists here, for being with us this evening, sharing their time, sharing their talent, and their brilliance. And it's been a pleasure talking to all of you. It's been great. So the last thing before we go, what are you recommending? Can I start with you, Richard?
Sure, I'm recommending Teaching Acting by my.
Oh,
okay, this is not even.
yeah,
Okay,
it's
can't even
blurring.
see it.
Yeah.
At any rate, here it is. Teaching Acting. Teaching Acting by Tony Schmidt. It's Some Things I Learned Along the Way. Teaching Acting, Some Things I Learned Along the Way by Tony Schmidt. Tony Schmidt's my mentor and my very dear friend. He's no longer with us, but he put in 40 plus years of his experience into teaching acting, Some Things I Learned Along the Way, which is available on Amazon, and it's fabulous. And Tony Schmidt was a great theater artisan, and you should take a look.
So I'm assuming, thank you for that. And I'm assuming it's a book that applies to everybody, right? It's not just like a book for a director or
It's
a book
actors,
for
directors, teachers. It's the whole gamut. Actors, directors, teachers, theater artisans. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. All right. Who'd like to go next?
I can jump in. Besides recommending folks come to Directors Haven 7 with Haven Chicago in 2 weeks, both to see my play, Skyflint, directed by Gabby Labatka, but also to see Leanna Oliveira directing the Siren Song of Stephen Jay Gould by Benjamin Bettenbender. And Faith Hart is directing Crapp's Last Tape by Samuel Beckett, and it's got some great clowning in it, which I think is an incredible take on it. The book I will recommend is called Beautiful Chaos, A Life in the Theater by Carrie Perloff. The last name is Perloff. She was the artistic director at the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco in the 90s. This book came out in about 2015, so it was about a decade ago. But it's a really great book if you've ever been like, what is my artistic director doing this? Or like, why? What is the process of running an arts situation? She was a working mother. There's like a story of her like walking uphill in San Francisco, like 8 months pregnant, and then like a board member being like, hey, how's it going? And she's like, oh, hello, let me tell you about this gala we're about to do. And like suddenly pivoting. There's also a story of like right after she took over ACT, she had to deal with the collapse of the institution. Like literally there was an earthquake and the theater collapsed in on itself. So there's some really lovely stories. I enjoyed reading it and feeling seen and being like, okay, so I'm not a failure if I'm struggling to take care of these immense difficulties that are coming my way. And it's a nice balm for anyone to read that's ever been like, how do we keep making theater? How do we not give up?
Wow. All right. LC, what have you got?
I'm going to recommend a play by a colleague that I think is just terrific and inventive and potent and wild, and it's by Zach Piercy, and it's called Fiona, and you can find it on New Play Exchange, and just, so many thousands of plays there, and if you're looking for the next one to put on your list, pick that one.
All right. And Grace.
Awesome. Before I give my recommendations, I wanted to plug something that I'm working on that I'm very excited about. The Chicago Artist Guide is a new web platform that will be going live very shortly within the next I would say couple months, and I'm doing the user experience design for this platform, and it is intended to be used as a way to help really diversify our theater community by connecting more actors with more productions and more people. So that's going to be really exciting. Okay, so I have 3 quick recommendations. First is a podcast. I think like this should be a podcast, honestly, but like maybe we should talk about it. But
it's a vodcast, baby.
It's a vodcast, which is yes, it's perfect. It is called Dear Hollywood, and it is by Allison, what's her last name? Stroner? Allison Stoner. So she was actually a like child star on the Disney Channel in like the 90s and early 2000s, and is like a dancer. She like toured with like really big concerts and whatnot. Anyways, she talks about, you know, what issues that she encountered as basically being like a child in entertainment, and kind of like how it's kind of changed her life as going into adulthood. So that's a really interesting one, especially, you know, for other theater type or people in entertainment in general. The other one is a book. It's called Feuding Fan Dancers, and it's by Leslie Zemeckis, who her husband did the directing, I think, for Back to the Future. And but this is a really great historical novel based on two different burlesque dancers in the golden showgirl age, Sally Rand and Faith Bacon, and they had like this very infamous feud over fan dancing, and it was really interesting. So that's really fun to kind of look into, especially if you ever want to learn more about what like showgirl life is like. And then lastly is a wonderful play by Carissa Muriel Myers, Black Bear Island. I think that it is being produced somewhere. I don't know. Check out her social medias and you'll find it out. But I remember like when she told me that she had this idea for the play, and I was like, what? It was just like so exciting. And so yeah, check that one out.
And Hank, if you'll indulge me, I'm sorry, I just forgot to mention that my premiere production of Someone Like Me in LA, along with George Capaz's In Whose Eyes, we're collaborating, the two of us, two one acts, at the Art of Acting Studio in Hollywood, California on North Orange Drive in October. Love to have, obviously, people come. So thanks. Sorry.
See, now that's a smart plug, because people are going to watch this over the next 4 months and still be able to go to
There you
it.
go.
I love that. Very
There you
clever.
go.
Like everybody should be pitching things that's going to happen 2-3 years out. I will pitch that Straw Dog has got some things going on over the next couple weeks at Berks, something called the Ides of March, which is a very pocket compact version of Julius Caesar that's happening at Berks in their sort of off room from the bar. So come by, have a drink, have some food, watch the show. And next week we'll be doing Thank You Five there live from I think 6:30 to 7:30, a much earlier show, to be followed by that production too. So if you are in Chicago and you happen to watch this before March 20th, 2024, come on by. If not, if it's after that, ask friends who went. They'll tell you what you missed. I think that's mostly it for tonight. We all will be reconvening in a green room in a moment, and we can talk for as long as you'd like. But folks who tuned in or are watching, thank you so much. I'm going to say goodnight now and just leave you with a thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.